everybody. Well, as you can see, after 2 years of a lot of sweat and not a little bit of blood, we have completed La Colmena. Now normally, we'd celebrate this with you and have you over, but that's a little problematic seeing as how we live in different hemispheres. So what I thought we'd do is make this movie and share our achievement with you long distance. So, before I walk you through the house, what I'd like to do is try to explain why I would move my family halfway around the world. And to do that, I need to begin at the beginning. And I do mean at the beginning.
I was born in 1960 in Los Angeles, California, to George and Nell Mines. I grew up in Pacific Palisades, a beach community between Santa Monica and Malibu. Being a kid back then was awesome. Back then, we used rotary phones, drank tap water, played in the street, and rode our bikes everywhere. Basically, you'd come home from school where your mom make you do some chores and finish your homework. Then you'd be free. You'd run out the door, into the street, look left and right, and whichever direction had the most kids, well, that would be where you'd go. For the next 3 or 4 hours, you'd build tree forts, play army with sticks, toss the football, and basically have the best fun ever. In the summer, we'd live on the beach. You'd play in the surf until your teeth chattered so bad no one could understand a word you were saying. As you got older, you'd do the same things, but with bigger and better stuff. Most of my friends surfed, but I got into sailing catamarans because, well, that's what my dad did. Life on the beach in Malibu was about as good as you'd imagine. Hanging out with your buddies, surfing, sailing, beach parties. It was simply the best. Then there were the sailing trips to the Channel Islands with my dad. Dad had a good friend, Paul Whistler, who would take us sailing on his 32-foot sloop. We'd sail out from Oxnard Harbor and mostly cruise around Santa Cruz Island. We had ocean kayaks to explore coves and caves that were only accessible from the ocean. We'd dive off the spreaders for abalone or just for fun. And the islands were like giant playgrounds. We'd beach our dinghy, explore different drainages, get chased by wild boar, and step on a few buffalo pies. Then there were the backpacking trips in the high Sierras. From the age of 12, I spent my summers backpacking with the older kids in the neighborhood. Imagine spending a week hiking in the mountains with your buddies from the neighborhood. It just doesn't get any better than that. And for the next 20 years, I continued to backpack in the high Sierras every summer. Now, you don't just build a house on the other side of the world without some training. And I got most of my construction experience from my dad. Dad graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with a degree in architecture. And while he never practiced professionally, he did design and build 2 houses for himself, one in Pacific Palisades and one in the southern Sierras above Lake Isabella. I helped him build the house in the Sierras while I was in college. We would work from sunup to sundown and sleep under the stars. I learned a lot about construction from my dad. After the house was complete, we would spend weekends up there, and eventually my dad retired there. Now fast forward 2 decades. I've been working as an engineer at Hughes Space and Communications for the last 25 years, which, for an engineer, is about as good as it gets. I live in the amazing house my dad built in Pacific Palisades. I'm married to a beautiful Argentine singer-songwriter. We have a son who's starting elementary school, the same elementary school I went to. It all seems ideal, right? Only an idiot would want to leave a life like that. Well, I guess I'm that idiot.
Come on. All right. Come here. Good girl. There you go. Let's figure this thing out yet. Well, so I really wanted Max to have the same experiences that I had when I was his age. The only problem was that LA and my hometown had changed quite a bit in the last 30 years. Hardly any of the kids I grew up with could even afford to live in the Palisades anymore. We couldn't afford to live there if we weren't living in my parents' house. You can't have fires, alcohol, or dogs on the beach, or even be on the beach after 10 p.m. So no more beach parties. And the worst of it all was when the city forced us to take our catamarans off the beach. So no more sailing. Kids don't play on the street anymore. I guess people are afraid they'll be kidnapped, or there's too much traffic, or I don't know what. But now you arrange a play date in advance and you drive your kid to the other person's house. Kids are driven everywhere. They don't ride their bikes to get around anymore. I'm pretty sure I know what happened. It's pretty simple. You got twice as many people living in the same amount of space. So there's less room for error. There's less margin in the system. So you got to have more rules, more regulations, more lawyers. The thing about it is that it happens slowly over time, incrementally. So you don't really notice it that well. I mean, it's like the frog in the pot. You're cooking the frog in the pot, but you just don't throw them in the pot and boil them right away. You put them in the pot gently, a little bit of water, turn the heat up real low, water gets nice and warm, and the frog relaxes, feels downright cozy in there, right? Probably falls asleep, has no idea he's being cooked. Now, I'm not saying that everybody in LA is getting cooked to death. I'm just saying that everybody's so distracted with the latest tweet or YouTube video that they don't realize what's being taken from them, what they're losing. I probably wouldn't have realized it either if my son hadn't been born. And I started comparing his childhood with mine. Well, I just thought it was kind of sad that some of the things that I took for granted when I was his age are just gone. Then there's the whole computer internet thing. My son started playing Minecraft, and later he got into watching YouTube videos. He would get furious when I told him to get off the computer. And really mad. It was like he was getting addicted to it, like it was a drug that he was hooked on. You know, these days it's like there's two worlds. There's the real one, and then there's the virtual one. And more with Max, I saw him being seduced by the virtual one and kind of detaching from the real one. And that's not good.
So while I'm having these thoughts, every year we are visiting Andrea's family in Argentina. Andrea has three brothers. Two live in Cordoba in the middle of the country, and one lives in Posadas in the north. In December, which is their summer, we would rent a house in the country, and the family would come and visit us on weekends. The Sierras outside Cordoba are covered with these idyllic lakes and rivers. We'd spend the day on the river, sipping mate. My brother in law would barbecue up some delicious Argentine beef, and Andrea and I would just chill out on a rock in the river.
Now, even though it's completely different, there's something about Argentina that reminds me of the LA I grew up in. Grittier and poorer for sure, but there's something about the sense of freedom here that I remembered from my childhood. And the country is beautiful. There's Patagonia in the south, the Lake District, the Central Pampas, the Paraná River, Iguazu Falls, and of course our Cordoban Sierras. And there's so much that we have yet to see. When we found this place, we bought it. For a vacation home originally, but, well, one thing led to another, and here we are. Now, I'd be lying to you if I said this has been a walk in the park. We've had to get through some tough times. But I'm still hopeful that my plan for Max will pan out. You know, living on the other side of the world and building a house in the middle of nowhere, there's a little bit of miracle there. Maybe he'll realize that if you believe in yourself and take a chance, things might actually go your way. And living in a foreign country, well, he's had to adapt to a totally different culture. And living in a developing country, he's had a front row seat to how the other 80% of the world lives. And he's done a fantastic job. His Spanish is flawless, and he's made tons of friends. And the familial relationships that he's developed here, well, his connections with his aunts and uncles and cousins, those will last for the rest of his life. And maybe he'll look up from his computer and see the world around him and fall in love with nature and the outdoors, as I did when I was his age. Especially if it's literally right outside his bedroom door. Well, that's kind of the why. Now, let's talk a little bit about how he designed and built La Colmena.
This may seem strange, but the first thing I thought of when I started to think about how our new home should be was my mother. Nell had a way of welcoming people into her home that made them feel wanted and special at the same time. The minute you walked into her house, you felt like you had reached some sort of sanctuary. She threw amazing parties where everyone participated. And she was super organized. She always used to say, "A place for everything and everything in its place." Even though she's been gone for over 25 years, she still resonates in everything I do. So, as we designed and built the house, I would be holding her in my thoughts and thinking of how she would have done things. Now, if Mom was going to be the heart of the house, Dad was definitely going to be the brains. George was a function over form type of architect. There has to be a reason for everything. Otherwise, you just don't build it. For example, Dad hated hallways because to him they were a waste of space. Most of his designs minimized hallways or got rid of them. All of his designs were modern, efficient, and in my opinion, elegant. I was going to try to emulate him as much as possible.
To me, designing a house begins with making decisions about how you want to live. So I would think about the times when I was really happy in my home. Of course, parties would come to mind, especially dinner parties with good friends. I remembered this really cool, funky house in Topanga Canyon that I rented with my buddy Carlos back in the 80s. Even though it would leak like a sieve and let in all sorts of critters, it had a feel to it that was perfect for country living. I guess you could say it had soul. I wanted our new house to have soul too.
After thinking of all the good times with friends and family, I started to visualize our life in Argentina. I pretended we were in our home or on the river or hiking or whatever, and tried to really see us there. All sorts of details would come to mind, and I would take note if there was something we'd need our new home to be or do for us to help create that particular vision.
Eventually, though, you have to stop visualizing and start designing. I have tremendous respect for architects, especially after designing this house. I'm sure if I'd hired an architect, they would have designed the house much faster, much more efficiently than I did. You see, the problem with me is I had three things against me. One, I'd never designed a house before. Two, it was going to be my house. Three, I'm an engineer. You put those three things together, and better always trumps good enough. The ugly truth is that I would get up in the morning at 5 o'clock, work on the design, go to work, come back, put Max to bed, work on the design, go to sleep. 2 years after starting this process, I'm still designing the house. I know, it's pathetic, but there it is. But one thing I will say, after being an engineer for 25 years and working on dozens of design teams, is that when it comes to the design process, it's always darkest before the dawn. It's like, just when you think it couldn't be crazier, more chaotic, more ideas, nothing makes sense, nothing's coming together, all of a sudden, there's something that happens that just, well, makes everything converge. It's like the supersaturated solution in high school chemistry. You drop the grain of salt in the supersaturated solution and boom, right before your eyes, everything crystallizes into a solid. And at least in my case, when designing La Colmena, that's what happened.
The grain for me was when I was at work, listening to one of our chief engineers describe a satellite cellular phone system we were building for Mexico. Satellites need to optimize how they use power to transmit signals to the Earth. So each beam was being focused into a hexagonal projection and then arranged so as to tile the state of Mexico in a honeycomb fashion. Our chief engineer said hexagons were the most efficient use of space. After all, if the bees use them, they must be good. A light bulb turned on in my head. Dad always used space efficiently. Bees are some of the most efficient animals on the planet. They use hexagons to build their homes. And that's how the idea for La Colmena, or the Beehive, was born.
Now, this may seem weird, but I'd like to pause and give a special thanks to the Google Corporation for providing all these free applications that they provide over the internet. I think I used every single one of them building La Colmena. It started out obviously with the search engine. We used Google search to find the parcels that we were looking for in this area here.
Then I used Google Earth to basically fly up rivers and look for optimal places for us to live. We were looking for land on the south bank of rivers that got plenty of sun. Also, all of my email correspondences to Argentina were written in English and then passed through Google Translate to convert them to Spanish. I would always review them afterward, but for the most part, they were good to go.
At one point, we were going to hire an architect to build the house for us. We would have weekly meetings using a Google application called Google Chat, which I think is now called Google Hangout, video conferencing software. Seeing that guy's expression every week when we would meet with him to discuss responsibilities convinced me to build the house myself. And in hindsight, I think we're really, really happy with that decision. I'm convinced that it would have cost twice as much and taken twice as long if we had hired an architect. Master Oria. Yeah.
But the most important app I used was Google SketchUp. I designed the entire house in it, including the plumbing, electrical, and heating systems. I used it to create this book that storyboarded the entire construction process. I gave it to my workers so they would understand how I wanted to build the house. Having the pictures allowed me to communicate, in my bad Spanish, exactly what I wanted to do. I was amazed at how fast I was able to learn how to use the application. Within a couple of days, I was laying out floor plans and playing around with different design concepts. I designed all of the furniture for La Colmena in SketchUp and used it to generate cut lists that greatly simplified the process of buying and then cutting the lumber that we used to build the furniture. SketchUp is a great tool. I don't build anything anymore without first going into SketchUp, laying everything out, and making sure that I'm thinking straight about what I really want to do.
And here we are, sharing our accomplishments with you over YouTube, which is a Google service. Now, I don't know why all of these things are free. Like, maybe one of these days somebody's going to start charging us for it. But for now, I'm loving it. I could have built La Colmena without all that stuff, but it sure made it a lot easier for me. So, thank you, Google.
The first thing we had to do when we arrived 2 years ago was get infrastructure set up so we could begin construction. My main concern was water. If we couldn't get a producing well, we were screwed. My neighbor had a drilling company, and one of his workers was a dowser. Now, I know that there's no scientific reason for it to work, but Jorge picked a spot right next to where we wanted to build the house, at the bottom of a hill, which was perfect for our water tank. So I was very happy with the location. And sure enough, we struck water. A lot of water. Jorge estimated that we passed through 3 different underground rivers, one on top of the other. He estimated that our flow rate was over 2,000 liters per hour. Later, we had it analyzed, and it was pure spring water. In hindsight, given the direction our world seems to be going, having our own source of pure drinking water for the family may prove to be the most important thing we did in coming to Argentina. Next, we needed to get power to the house. Luckily, we had utility power. Unluckily, the nearest transformer was 300 meters away. So we had to dig a very long trench and lay a lot of subterranean cable. We were installing three-phase power, so the cable needed to be 4 wires, 3 hot and a common. Each wire had a diameter of 8 millimeters, which makes for a heavy, heavy cable, which we laid in by hanging the roll off a backhoe.
¿Todo bien? ¿Cómo estás?
With our water secured, we removed the rocks, leveled the pad, and surveyed the building site. The geology here is rock and more rock, and I was exceptionally adept at finding rocks everywhere I dug. There was a spine of rock that went right across the middle of our pad. I'd gotten the biggest tractor I could find in the valley, and I spent 2 days directing the business end of it in removing that spine. I hired an architect, Gustavo, with a laser level to help me perform the site surveys, interview potential builders, and basically translate my bad Spanish into something that made sense to the various contractors we used. For the most part, we were able to triangulate locations to plus or minus a couple inches with 2 fiberglass tape measures and a lot of rebar stakes. Then there was the plumbing, supplies, drains, and in this case, earth tubes and radiant heating. I didn't want to install an active air conditioning system, and I didn't even know if I'd need to cool the house, but I did want to be able to cool it if necessary. So I bought some 8-inch diameter pipe and laid 5 runs into the bedrooms, dining room, and living room. Each run was about 25 to 30 meters long and around 1.5 meters deep. I'd researched earth tubes, and that seemed to be the minimum you needed to cool the air once it entered the pipe. For the water supplies and radiant heating, I ran polypropylene tubing as conduit for the flexible plastic tubing we would use for the supply lines. That way I could literally replace my entire plumbing system without lifting a shovel, which at this point was very appealing. I ran toilet drains to the septic tank and the drains for everything else to an open field where I was going to experiment with bacteria-eating aquaculture and hopefully grow a willow tree. We installed the septic tank next, primarily so we could build a bathroom over top it. I probably overdid it on the size of the tank and the leach field. Juan Pablo, the tractor operator, said it was a 100-year septic system. But better safe than sorry. Now we would have fresh porcelain to sit on. For a construction worker in South America, it just doesn't get any better than that. I built the carport and workshop next. It would provide covered space to store materials and a bunkhouse for the workers. I did most of the work myself with the occasional help from my brothers-in-law and the constant attention of our new puppy, Oria. Here in Argentina, construction projects in the countryside require the workers to live on-site, usually in temporary sheds they build for themselves. By comparison, my workers had deluxe accommodations, with bunk beds, a gas stove for cooking, a refrigerator, and a wood-burning stove for heat during the winter. We even installed DirecTV for them. It's amazing what 5 guys can do in a year in the middle of nowhere, given enough rebar, Portland cement, and bricks. Overall, the guys were great, even if we did have a lot of turnover. There were only 2 fights to speak of, and no one really got hurt, so no harm, no foul. You did have to watch the number of wine boxes that showed up in the trash, and if a guy's eyes were a little red, well, you kept him off the roof and away from the power tools. Occasionally something would go missing, but half the time it would show up again a month later, so again, no harm, no foul. Of course, our new puppy, Oria, was a big hit with the guys, although they did have another name for her, La Molesta.
Because of all its crazy angles, all of the furniture of La Colmena had to be specially designed for each location. Luckily, my brother-in-law, Claudio, is an amazing carpenter and was able to help me realize my designs. With his help, we were able to build out all of the cabinetry and shelving in a matter of weeks. I used Guayuvera hardwood from the northern province of Misiones, combined with melamine particle board. I had used the Guayuvera before when I built the carport and fell in love with its beautiful grains and colors. It would give the furniture a much more natural look compared to the sterile particle board. Even Alex, Andrea's oldest brother, got into the act as well. We actually had a lot of fun, and it was extremely satisfying to finally put the finishing touches on the house.
As you might expect, not everything went smoothly. Of the 3 concrete pours, 2 were done in a soaking downpour. The guy who did the stained concrete floors was a complete idiot and almost destroyed my house. And, of course, I had my fair share of cock-ups, too. I'm still trying to get the radiant floor system to adequately heat the house. I almost knocked myself out clearing trees. And I cracked a couple ribs testing the zip line. Oh. But as the bard says, all's well that ends well. All in all, it took 14 months to raise the house at a cost of about $150,000, not including land and infrastructure, which was another $50,000. That's for an interior of about 2,200 square feet and a covered porch of over 1,300 square feet. Depending on how you count it, that's a finished cost of about $40 to $60 a square foot, not including my labor.
Well, you guys have been real patient. You've listened to all of my stories. So now, it's finally time to show you La Colmena. You ready, bud? Let's do it.
living on a river is different than being on the coast. Unlike the hypnotic beat of the waves crashing on the beach, you hear the dull roar of the river flowing by. It's a constant reminder that time is passing, moments are fleeting, and life is short. For me, when all's said and done, you want to be able to look back at your life and say you had a good run. That the good times outweighed the bad, and your regrets, well, they become a kind of badge of honor that you own up to and can accept. What I'm saying is, pull out that bucket list and get on with it. This is not a dress rehearsal. We've only got one shot at life, and we need to make the most of it. Because that river is going to flow, no matter what. And if you're not flowing with it, you're getting passed by.
Coming from a rainy Thursday on the avenue, thought I heard you talking softly. I turned on the lights, the TV and the radio. Still I can't escape the ghost of you. What has happened to it all? Crazy summer say, where is the life that I recognize? But I won't cry for yesterday. There's an ordinary world somehow I have to find. And as I try to make my way to the ordinary world, I will learn to survive. Passion or coincidence once prompted you to say, pride will tear us both apart. Well now bride's gone out the window, crossed the rooftops, run away. Left me in the vacuum of my heart. What is happening to me? Crazy some say. Where is my friend when I need you most? But I won't cry for yesterday. There's an ordinary world somehow I have to find. And as I try to make my way to the ordinary world, I will learn to survive. Papers in the roadside tell of suffering and grief. Fear today, forgot tomorrow. Here, beside the news of hope.